Are y'all awake? I think the 11 o'clock service is more awake than y'all usually. So my name is Jamie. Nice to be up here. It's a privilege to be up here to talk to you guys today. I'm a small group leader for the 6th grade boys. Where are my 6th grade boys at? I'm not in this service usually, but yeah, they're back there in the back row Baptist. Is that what's going on back there? So yeah, I am super excited to come talk to y'all today about boundaries. What is a boundary? Okay. There we go. A boundary is defined as a real or imagined line that marks the edge or limit of something, or the limit of what someone considers to be acceptable behavior. So what do you guys think about boundaries? They keep people what? They keep you from something. Okay. What else? What else? Say it again. They keep you alive. That's in line. Well, they keep you alive too. Safe. So do you guys generally think boundaries are a good thing or a bad thing? If you think they're a good thing, put your thumb up. If you think they're a bad thing, put your thumb down. If you think it's in the middle, let me see this. Okay, we got a good mixture. Well, I hope that by the end of this talk that I can convince you that boundaries are good. That's my goal. So I'm going to show you a couple of cool examples of boundaries just because I like pictures and I took some cool pictures in the past that I want to show you. So if you could bring up that picture, the first one. Anybody know what that is? Yes. Has anybody been there, by the way? Okay, cool. So if you ever visit China, by the way, you have to climb the wall, okay? Like that's a thing. Like if you don't do that, then like they're not going to respect you or something. I don't remember. But I was there. I took that picture. That was a long time ago, 2003, I believe. That wall is really old and it's huge. And I'm really not sure how they put that wall on top of mountains. Slave labor, I mean, it was crazy, right? So that's a really big boundary. Like that's one of the biggest ones I can think of. That thing is huge. Some of it's in disrepair, but a lot of it looks really good like this, and you can visit it. So when I think about boundaries or walls, this is one that comes to mind. And then the next slide, I also took this picture. Anybody know what this is? I heard somebody say Jerusalem. It's Jerusalem, okay? That right there is a picture of the old city wall at the Jaffa Gate. So I was privileged to be able to spend about a whole semester of graduate school in Jerusalem, and I studied there. And so whenever I think about boundaries, because we don't have walls around cities here, right? But there, it's so crazy because there's this old city right in the middle of like modern day Jerusalem, and it's got this giant wall around it, okay? And like you have like modern city right here, and then you have this thing. And it's like it's just really amazing. If you ever get a chance to go, you definitely need to go. I'm gonna tell you another story about Israel here in a second. So, by the way, do those two boundaries that I just showed you, do they keep people in or do they keep people out? Both? You think both? I would say, yeah, I would agree with that, but the Great Wall was definitely built to keep a certain people out. Do you know who? The Mongolians. You guys know your history. Good job. And so what about the city wall, the walls around Jerusalem? What were those meant to keep out? Anything that would harm people, I guess you could say. Cool. All right, so some of y'all alluded to this a minute ago, but when you're a kid, most of your boundaries are imposed on you by other people. Am I right? You guys feel like you got a lot of boundaries put on you? Yeah. Well, guess what? And you guys have already said it, but it's for your protection for the most part, right? Like your parents, your teachers, the government, they put boundaries on us to keep us safe. You might think that like some of them are lame or whatever, but they're put there for the most part to keep you safe, and also to make sure that you like don't like, you know, go hungry or never sleep. Why would I say that? Because I have children who literally, if I did not give them a boundary, they would play video games all the time. Like they wouldn't eat, they wouldn't go to sleep. So those things are important, right? Like my kids need to eat and they need to sleep. So literally, like I have to limit their time on their devices because they literally would just never eat or sleep. What do you think would happen, by the way, if they would die? Well, they would certainly not do well in school, being tired and hungry all the time. Okay, so boundaries are designed to protect you in most cases, even though it may not seem that way. So even if you think somebody's trying to take your fun away or not allow you to have fun, most of the time there's a really good reason for it. Let me tell you a quick story. So check out this picture. Does anybody know what that building is? Say it. Who said it? Somebody said it. I heard somebody say it. Dome of the Rock, yes. That is the Dome of the Rock. It is, does anybody, okay, that is where the temple, the Jerusalem temple, the Jewish Israeli temple was a long time ago. And this building is there now on top of, there's actually an exposed rock, like it's underground, most of it, but the top of it's exposed. That's what that building is over top of. And supposedly that's the rock that the Jerusalem temple was built on. And so that's why it's called the Dome of the Rock. But that is an Islamic building. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but there's Arabic writing all over it. And so it's sort of under the control of a group of Arabs called the Waqf. I don't remember what that stands for, but they're kind of in charge of that. And so there's a whole Temple Mount area up there that the public cannot access, okay? However, they do allow tourists to go up there, like, I don't know if it's every day, but a few times a week maybe, and there's a time limit, okay? So me and some of my friends from school, we decided to go up there one day. If you're Jewish, by the way, good luck getting up there, because like I said, it's under Arab control, and they don't like each other sometimes, so, but we were able to get up there. And so we're walking around up there, and there's this area up there where there were these big dirt mounds because the Waqf had been digging just doing some renovation type stuff, trying to build something, and they were digging up all this dirt. Listen, dirt under the Temple Mount. Do you think that dirt could have something cool in it? I think so, yeah. It's like an archaeological dig, but you know what? They didn't care. So they just dug it up and put all the dirt over here. And so there were some students from some of the Israeli schools that were also going out there just kind of trying to find artifacts. So we decided to do that. So we're digging through this dirt. We were finding some like coins and stuff like that, nothing major. We're just having a good old time. And next thing I know, we're not paying attention to what time it is or anything like that. Next thing I know, there's some Israeli police that come over to us and they go, "What are you guys doing? What are you doing here?" We're like, "Oh, we're and they're like, "You were supposed to leave like an hour ago." And they were like, "You need to come with us right now, or you might be your safety could be in jeopardy." Like they were serious. They're like, "You better be glad we found you instead of the Waqf, because if they had found you, this might have gone really bad for you." And so we started walking, and they escorted us, and they were like, "Stay with us the whole time." Two Israeli cops, they had their guns and everything on them. And they're like, "Guys, don't look around, don't look at anybody, don't make any eye contact, just head down and follow us." And so we were like scared to death, like, "Oh, like what's gonna happen?" So I learned from that if somebody tells you that you need to be leaving a certain place at a certain time, then there's probably a good reason for it. Like, they don't want you to get killed. Am I doing something weird with my mic? Sorry. I'll behave. Wait, are we switching it out? Let me see if I sit still, if it'll behave. Oh, I think it just got stuck on my beard. Okay, so, if somebody tells you to not do something and they don't give you a reason, just assume, hey, maybe I should not do that, especially if you're in Israel. So if you're in Israel ever, and someone says, "Don't go to this place," don't go there, okay? They're trying to protect you. All right. So does God impose boundaries on people? Do you guys think? Yeah, he certainly does. In fact, it doesn't take him long to do that. The first time we see him do that is in Genesis chapter 2. Who knows what's happening in Genesis chapter 2? The what? The apple tree. Well, we don't know that it's an apple, but yes, there's a tree there. Well, there's a bunch of trees there, but there's a particular tree that we're interested in. So let me set the stage a little bit. So God's created the heavens and the earth and all that, and then Adam is created, and then it's just Adam and God hanging out in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden, nobody really knows where it is or where it was, but somewhere in the Tigris-Euphrates area, which is like modern-day Iraq, somewhere over there. We don't really know, but they're hanging out. And then so in Genesis chapter 2, I'm just going to read this. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die." Okay? So God's telling Adam this. Okay, cool. Here, look, you can eat anything you want, man. Just not that tree. Just leave that tree alone. Does that sound kind of fair? I mean, seems fair to me. So then what happens after this? God's like, well, Adam's kind of by himself, and he seems lonely, so I want to create a mate for him. He makes a bunch of animals. They weren't good. So then he was like, ended up making Eve. And he made Eve out of Adam's what? Rib. And he was kind of asleep, because that's good, because it might have hurt when he did that. And so then he decides to make Eve. And then he makes Eve. And then Eve is a good helper for God. And then next thing you know, there is a snake that shows up. Do y'all know about the snake? The snake says, what does he do? He says to Eve, you don't have to worry about what God said. I know God said don't eat from that tree, but it's fine. The only reason why he doesn't want you to eat from that tree is because he doesn't want you to be like him, knowing good and evil. And so what happened then? They ate from the tree. So what happened after that? They crossed the boundary, okay? The boundary that was given was crossed. Was it bad for them after that? Yeah, it was real bad. It was real bad. They died eventually, obviously, which is something that they were told they had to be careful of. But then they were cursed, and then they were kicked out of the garden. So they lost their innocence because they realized they were naked. They lost their relationship with God, okay? Because remember, God and Adam and Eve were hanging out in the garden together. They were hanging out, talking, and then God kicked them out. And then they were cursed. So I would say things went pretty bad for them. Would y'all agree with that? Yeah. So I asked myself this question: why didn't they do something to prevent themselves from eating from this tree? Like, why didn't they create a boundary of some sort? Because God gave them the boundary, but like, why didn't they reinforce that boundary? Why didn't they like build a fence around the tree? Have y'all ever thought about this? Like, they probably didn't. They might not have known how to build a fence, but supposedly there were walls around the garden, so I don't know. But, and maybe, okay, so I have to conclude that they did not appreciate their situation very much. They did not value their situation very much because maybe they didn't know any better, okay, so if I'm being fair. But if they had valued the way their life was, they wouldn't have eaten from that tree. Would y'all agree with that? Like, if they really realized what would happen, or they thought through it, if I cross this boundary, this is what might happen to me, they probably wouldn't have done that, right? So I don't know why they did that, but all of us are kind of like, thanks a lot, guys, you know, like, appreciate that. But the reality is that when you value something, you will create boundaries around it. So, do you guys have anything that you lock? What do you lock? You lock your doors. Why do you do that? Because you don't want your sister to come in your room. That's a boundary. You created a boundary because your room is important to you, right? What else? What else do you guys value? You lock your phone. You don't want people getting into your phone and seeing your private information. Your money. So see, when we value things, like, we will, in fact, create a boundary around that. So I want to talk real quick about a really good example in the Bible of somebody who I think exemplifies exactly what I'm talking about in terms of when you value something, you build a boundary around it. So Nehemiah, how many of y'all know who Nehemiah is? Heard of Nehemiah? Okay. Nehemiah is a really cool dude. He's about 5 years old. He lives at my house. That's a true story. My 5-year-old, his name is Nehemiah. And I named him that because I like this character in the Bible. But what about this character do I actually like? Well, who knows what he did? If you could just say it in a couple words. Does anybody know? Okay, cool. You're about to learn. So there's a book in the Old Testament that's named after him. It's called Nehemiah. And to set the stage really quick, Jerusalem is completely destroyed, okay? It's been laying in ruins for 100 years because the Babylonians had taken the Jews into exile earlier, and the people that were left behind weren't doing anything to keep Jerusalem nice. It was just basically a rundown heap of trash. Like, there was nothing to it. It wasn't nice. It wasn't glorious. God's temple wasn't being taken care of. All of that stuff. Nothing was going on. Okay, bad. It's a bad situation. And Nehemiah, who happened to be in the court of the Persian king, knew about this situation and wanted to fix it. So he got permission from the king to go back to Jerusalem to help fix everything, to get Jerusalem, restore Jerusalem back to its glory, if you will. And so what do you think the first thing he did when he got to Jerusalem in order to help Jerusalem be fixed and restored? Did you have your hand up? What? Say it again? He went to the church. Well, he didn't go to the temple, but he did create a boundary. So Nehemiah is known for building a wall. So let's look at this scripture real quick. This is Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 17 through 20. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. But then some people heard about it, and they got mad. And they said, what is this you're doing? He said, "Are you rebelling against the king?" And I answered them by saying, "The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it." So they began building this wall around the city. Remember what we talked about earlier about why walls are good around cities? There's still a wall around Jerusalem. There's still a wall there. Now, it's not this wall that they rebuilt. It's been rebuilt multiple times, but the stones that they used when they rebuilt it are still at the bottom. They're still under there. So it took them 52 days to build this wall. And this is a huge wall, guys, huge. I mean, I don't even know how many miles it is, and I don't know how tall it was, but that's a lot of work. And not only did they build it in 52 days, but they had to hold a weapon in one hand while they were building it. So check this out. Look at this next passage after the wall has been built. After the wall had been rebuilt and I had set the doors in place, the gatekeepers, the musicians, and the Levites were appointed, I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother, along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, because he was a man of integrity and feared God more than most people do. I said to them, "The gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot." That makes sense, right? Don't open the gates at night. "While the gatekeepers are still on duty, have them shut the doors and bar them. Also appoint residents of Jerusalem as guards, some of their posts and some of their own houses." Now the city was large and spacious, but listen. There were few people in it, and the houses had not yet been built. So wait, he built a wall around a city that had nobody living in it? Does that make sense to you guys? Well, it actually does make a lot of sense, because without the wall, nobody wants to live there because it's not safe, right? Like, you didn't want to live in a city that didn't have any protection around it back then, because whenever nightfall came, that's when all the robbers and the thieves and all the bad people would just come into the city and take whatever they wanted. So if there was no wall, there were no doors, there were no guards, people could just come and go whenever they want to, take whatever they want, steal whatever they want. So people couldn't live there because it just wasn't safe. So Nehemiah knew that in order for God's city, the city on the hill, the most holy city in the entire world, the holiest ground in the entire world, in order for that to be what it used to be, the first thing that needed to happen was a boundary needed to be put around it. So, and it tells us later that after the wall was built, they all went to the temple and basically worshiped. And they read from the book of the law and they worshiped the Lord. And that hadn't been happening before the wall. So this was a huge, huge thing that happened. So just to recap really quick, why are boundaries important? Because they're designed to protect you. Because they're often necessary for you to succeed. In other words, you can't have a thriving city with a nice temple that people want to come worship at if you don't have security and a wall around it, right? It's necessary for success. And because without them, everything would be chaos, okay? So I'm just going to tell you guys that if your life feels like chaos, if there's any area of your life that feels like chaos right now, it's probably because you lack a boundary or you lack some boundaries. You might need to build a fence around your boundaries. You know what I mean? What does that look like? Well, let's say, let's talk about sexual purity. That's what we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks, right? So let's apply this to that. Do you value your sexual purity? Because if you do, you're going to build a wall around that. So how does that look? How can you build a wall around that boundary? Maybe you need to delete that app. Maybe you need to find an accountability partner. Maybe you need to end that relationship. Maybe you need to stop sitting with that kid on the bus who always has stuff on his phone that you shouldn't be looking at. You know what I'm saying? You guys already know that you have a boundary, right? The boundary has been put forth for you. If you value your sexual purity and you want to honor God with that, you probably need to build a wall around that. You with me? Awesome. So I want you to think like Nehemiah. I'm going to send you guys to small groups. But may you, like Nehemiah, build the wall in your life so that he may be glorified. Let me pray real quick, and then you guys can go to small groups. Dear Lord, thanks so much for this time we had together and for Nehemiah's example. And we just pray that you would be with us in our discussions today. In Jesus' name, amen. If you don't know where to go, find somebody.